To speak of democracy is to speak of the power of the people. But that word has been distorted, corrupted by the progressive liberals of the left who currently govern the European Union for Brussels. Can we truly call Democrats those bureaucrats who make decisions without consultation, affecting people's lives, their economy, and their sovereignty? Is democracy supposed to be the absolute power of a few elites deciding the fate of millions, humiliating the cradle of Western civilization, its faith, its traditions, its people? No, dear listeners, that is not democracy. That is tyranny. That is extremism, left-wing extremism disguised as moral virtue. Welcome to Point of Rupture. Today, we're talking about Brussels' favorite topic, right-wing extremism. But what does that actually mean? Why so much panic? And why is it always right-wing? You rarely hear about the technocratic extremism or the progressive authoritarianism of the globalist left. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's start with a concrete example, AfD in Germany. For those unfamiliar, AfD stands for Alternative für Deutschland, Alternative for Germany, a party that has been labeled by media outlets, institutions, and bureaucrats as far-right. Why? Because they defend European culture, call for control over mass immigration, and advocate for national sovereignty in the face of Brussels' supranational power. Immediately, ideological sirens go off at the European Commission. Warning, extremism detected. But let's pause. What does this actually mean? According to Brussels, anyone who rejects their technocratic model, their forced multiculturalism, or their mystical vision of the Green Deal as some kind of cosmic salvation is labeled an extremist. You reject mandatory immigration quotas? Extremist. You criticize decisions imposed without referendums? Populist. You dare say Europe should preserve its cultural identity? Xenophobe. And what is Brussels doing in the meantime? They impose environmental regulations that suffocate the automotive and energy industries, forcing German companies to relocate to countries like China or the US, where cheap energy is still allowed without guilt. But of course, that's not extremism. That's strategic vision. Now add electoral manipulation to the mix. In the state of Saarland, AfD candidate lists were excluded for administrative technicalities. What a coincidence. No evidence of fraud, but the scent of premeditated exclusion is strong. Now imagine if it had happened to a left-wing party. That would have been called an attack on democracy. Another case, in Romania, elections were overturned because certain candidates were deemed too conservative. And what did the European elite do? They validated the annulment, claiming that democracy was in danger. In other words, if people vote the wrong way, the people must be corrected. Isn't that exactly what Brussels accuses so-called extremists of doing? Disregarding the rules when they don't suit them? So who's really playing dirty? Let's now tackle another taboo subject, Islamic migration. For European progressives, questioning the open-door model is racist. But the reality is that, in many cases, Muslim communities do not integrate into European societies. This is not opinion, it's fact. And anyone walking through certain neighborhoods of Brussels, Paris, or Berlin can see it. This is not about hatred or xenophobia. It's about cultural reality. Islam is not only a religion, it's also a political and legal system. Many of its adherents do not recognize the primacy of secular laws or liberal European values. And yet, Brussels continues to promote mass immigration with no filters, no real integration, and above all, no self-criticism. So who's really building a ticking time bomb? Is it AfD, saying let's set boundaries before this spirals out of control? Or the globalist elite, encouraging demographic replacement in the name of progress and diversity? Because yes, the Great Replacement is no longer just a conspiracy theory when the numbers speak for themselves. In Brussels, over 70% of residents under 18 have no European roots. That wouldn't be a problem if integration were happening. But it's not. What we're seeing is a progressive dismantling of European culture, without debate, without consent. And when a politician dares to speak the truth out loud, they are instantly labeled extremist. In other words, defending your culture, your industries, your laws, your identity has become dangerous. Let's also talk about the Green Deal. Who decided, without public consultation, that Europe must become carbon neutral, even if it wrecks its economy? Who ordered the dismantling of vital industries, the shutdown of energy plants, and the punishment of fossil fuel use, while China and India continue to pollute freely without consequence? That is true extremism, ideological environmentalism that kills jobs, raises the cost of living, and weakens our energy sovereignty. And that brings us to the real point of rupture. The official narrative says extremists are those who oppose this madness, those who still believe Europe should decide for itself, that nations have the right to protect their culture and people, that democracy is no democracy if it only applies when the right side wins. But if someone forces a societal model upon you, strips away freedoms, manipulates elections, and labels common sense as hate, then maybe the true extremist isn't the one who resists, but the one who imposes. That was today's episode of Point of Rupture. If it made you think, mission accomplished. If it made you smile, welcome to the club of those who still have critical thinking. And if it made you uncomfortable, well, sometimes the truth does. See you in the next episode.